Okay, so for everyone listening, I want you to just pull up a mental map of the world for a second.
Right.
Scan over to the Middle East, find the Persian Gulf, and then look for that tiny pinched exit at the bottom.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly, the Strait of Hormuz. We talk about geographical choke points all the time, the Suez, Panama, Malacca.
Sure.
But Hormuz is different. It feels different. It's not just a bottleneck. It's like the only neck. And on the night of February 3rd, 2026, so just last week, hands started tightening around it in a way we haven't seen in decades.
It was a terrifyingly close call. I mean, we usually talk about these geopolitical flare-ups in the abstract.
Yeah.
Rhetoric, sanctions, sternly worded letters.
That's very theoretical.
Very. But February 3rd wasn't abstract at all. There's 21 miles of water suddenly crowded with gunboats, a U.S.-flagged tanker, and a decision tree that had, well, global war on one of its branches.
And that's what we're unpacking today. This is our deep dive. Not just the geography, but the mechanics of a crisis that almost broke the world economy on a random Tuesday. Because when you look at the data, this wasn't an accident.
No, it was a stress test.
A stress test. That is the perfect way to describe it.
And to really understand the results of that test, you have to grasp the sheer volume of energy that is forcing its way through that channel every single day. We're not talking about a few ships here and there.
No.
We are talking about the artery of the modern world.
I was looking at the shipping manifest for that week, and it's just staggering. Roughly 20% of the world's crude oil and liquefied gas.
1/5.
1/5 of the global supply. To put that in perspective for you, imagine 5 gas stations in your town. Now imagine one of them suddenly just burns down. The lines at the other 4 don't just get longer.
Oh, panic sets in immediately.
Instantly. And unlike that gas station, you can't just drive to the next town.
No, you can't. And for the nations that are really dependent on this energy, I'm talking Japan, South Korea, India, China, access to Hormuz isn't just a strategic advantage. It is existential.
Existential is the right word.
If that water stops moving, their economies don't just slow down, they suffocate. I mean, factories go dark in Tokyo. Heating cuts off in Seoul. It's that serious.
That's the part that always gets me about Hormuz. It's the total lack of a plan B. When the Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal a few years back, it was a logistical nightmare, absolutely.
Huge mess.
A huge mess, but ships could, theoretically, sail around the Cape of Good Hope. It added weeks and a fortune in fuel, but the cargo eventually got there. Hormuz doesn't have a go-around option.
It's a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
That's the best way to think about it. The Persian Gulf is this massive energy warehouse with only one door.
And if you lock that door,
the energy is trapped inside. There is no pipeline network that's robust enough to bypass it. I mean, Saudi Arabia has the East-West pipeline, and the UAE has a bypass to Fujairah, but combined, they can't handle a fraction of the total volume. Not even close.
So a blockade here isn't just some regional dispute. It's an immediate global heart attack. Which, okay, brings us to the night of February 3rd. The night the door almost slammed shut. I've been reading the maritime reports on this, and the timeline is just chilling because of how fast everything escalated.
And speed is the defining feature of any kind of conflict in a confined space like that. You don't have hours to sit and deliberate, you have seconds.
So set the scene for us. It's night. Visibility is low. You have a U.S.-flagged oil tanker making a routine transit.
Just a normal commercial run. They're in international waters, following the shipping lanes, minding their own business.
And standard protocol is what? Stay in your lane, maintain radio silence unless you're hailed, and just keep moving.
Exactly. But then the radar lights up. Iranian gunboats, we're talking fast attack craft, they break formation and move to intercept.
And these aren't, destroyers sitting miles off on the horizon. These are small, agile boats swarming the tanker.
Right up close. And the reports say they actually ordered the tanker to stop for boarding.
Which is a massive escalation. I mean, it's one thing to shadow a ship. It's another thing entirely to try and seize a sovereign piece of U.S. territory, which is effectively what a flagged ship is.
That is the red line. Boarding a commercial vessel in international waters under those circumstances is an act of aggression. If that tanker captain had complied, we'd be having a very, very different conversation today.
We'd be talking about a hostage crisis.
At a minimum.
But the captain didn't comply. And this is where it feels like a movie script kicks in. Instead of cutting the engines, the tanker throttles up. They decide to run the gauntlet.
Which is an incredible gamble. It's a high-stakes game of chicken. A tanker is this massive, sluggish beast compared to a fast attack craft.
Yeah.
You can't outmaneuver them.
No way.
But you can refuse to be an easy target. By speeding up, the captain forced the Iranians to make a choice.
Yeah.
let them go, or open fire.
And while all this is happening, the distress calls are blasting out. A U.S. warship in the vicinity responds and moves to intercept.
And that's the moment of maximum danger. You have Iranian naval forces and the U.S. Navy within visual range of each other, maneuvering aggressively at night. One nervous sailor, one accidental discharge, one misunderstood radio command.
And you have a hot war.
You have a hot war, but no shots were fired. The Iranians peeled off and the tanker kept moving.
Why? Why did they peel off?
Because the message had been delivered. This is what we call gray zone warfare. The goal isn't necessarily to sink the ship. The goal is to prove that you can.
It's about demonstrating capability and willingness.
Exactly. They took it right to the edge of the cliff and then they stopped. But they didn't stop everywhere.
Right. And this is key. This wasn't some isolated bad mood on a Tuesday night. If we zoom out a little, this incident was part of a coordinated pattern of disruption that week. Because while the U.S. tanker got away, others, well, they weren't so lucky.
Correct. In the same 48-hour window, Iran seized 2 other foreign oil tankers in the Gulf. They boarded them, detained the crews, and impounded the vessels.
And the justification they gave was smuggling.
The smuggling defense. It's the perfect geopolitical cover.
It sounds so legitimate, doesn't it? We're just enforcing customs laws.
And that's the whole point. If you say, we are seizing this ship to pressure the West, that's an act of war. But if you say, we are seizing this ship because they have undeclared fuel in the hold, that is a law enforcement action.
It keeps the conflict in that legal gray area.
It does. It allows for diplomatic room to maneuver while you're still holding the ships, and more importantly, the crews, as bargaining chips.
And we know it was about bargaining because of the timing. You don't just accidentally seize 2 ships and swarm a third right before you sit down at the negotiating table.
Exactly. Diplomatic talks were scheduled to resume in Muscat, Oman, within days of these incidents. This wasn't random, it was leverage.
Pure leverage.
It's the classic tactic of escalate to de-escalate. You create a crisis so that you can then offer the solution. You walk into that meeting room in Muscat and say, look how volatile the region is. We can guarantee security, but we need concessions.
It's a protection racket. Nice shipping lane you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
Effectively, yes. But it's a racket being played with nuclear-capable nations.
So this brings me to the big question, though, the one that keeps coming up in all the analysis I've read. If Iran wanted leverage, and if tensions were this high, why stop at harassment? Why didn't they just close the strait?
The nuclear option of closing the strait.
Exactly. I remember reading that the Iranian parliament, the Majlis, they actually voted in favor of closing the strait back in 2025. They have the legislation on the books, they have the mines, they have the missiles. So why didn't they pull the trigger on February 3rd?
To answer that, you have to understand the difference between, let's say, Iranian political theater and Iranian strategic survival. The parliament voting to close the strait is largely performative. It's for domestic consumption.
It's signaling.
It's signaling. It shows the people, we are standing up to the imperialists. We control these waters.
But the people actually giving the orders.
The Supreme National Security Council, they are the ones who have to deal with the reality of what would be, well, economic suicide.
Because Iran exports its own oil through the very same strait.
They do. If they mine the waters, as we said, they're mining their own driveway. They're blockading themselves. But it goes deeper than just their own exports. It's about who buys that oil. We need to talk about the China factor.
This is huge, because we often frame this as just Iran versus the West. But China is the ghost at the table here.
China is the primary lifeline for the Iranian economy. They buy the vast majority of Iranian oil, often ignoring Western sanctions to do it. And China relies heavily on the Strait of Hormuz for its own energy security.
So if Iran closes the strait to hurt the U.S., they are effectively choking the Chinese economy at the exact same time.
And that is a bridge they simply cannot afford to burn. Beijing has been very clear, both privately and publicly, that the free flow of oil through that strait is non-negotiable.
Wow.
If Iran shuts down the strait, they don't just lose revenue, they lose their most powerful diplomatic protector. They would be totally isolated.
So the Supreme National Security Council looks at the board, they see the U.S. Navy, they see the economic suicide of blocking their own exports, and they see a very, very angry China on the other end of the phone.
And the calculus becomes crystal clear. Harassment is profitable, closure is fatal. You create fear, you spike the insurance rates for shipping, you ratter the markets. But you keep the oil flowing just enough to keep Beijing happy and avoid a full-scale invasion.
You mentioned insurance rates. That's an aspect we usually gloss over, but it's where a lot of the real damage happens, isn't it? Even without a full closure, that war risk surcharge kicks in.
Immediately. The moment those gunboats swarmed that tanker, I guarantee you actuaries in London and New York started adjusting their spreadsheets. Every single ship entering the Persian Gulf now has to pay a massive premium to be insured.
Which means the cost of transport goes up.
Which means the price of the oil goes up, and that cost is passed directly to you. It's in the price of gas, of course, but it's also in the price of plastics, fertilizer, shipping, logistics for every product on the shelf. You pay for the tension in the Strait of Hormuz, even if it stays open.
So in a way, they actually achieved their goal. They inflicted economic pain on the West without firing a single shot.
They imposed a tax on the global economy, a fear tax.
Let's just play the what-if game for a second. We're sitting here analyzing why it didn't happen, but let's say the tanker captain panicked, or a gunboat got too close and there was a collision, or the U.S. warship opened fire. What does the morning of February 4th look like?
It would be unrecognizable. If the strait is declared a combat zone, all commercial shipping stops instantly. No captain is going to sail a supertanker full of explosive liquid into a live crossfire.
So that 20% of global supply just vanishes overnight.
Overnight. You'd see oil prices likely double, maybe even triple, within hours. Stock markets in Asia, Europe, and the U.S. would crash. You'd see immediate rationing in countries that rely on those imports.
And the military response would be?
Massive. The U.S. Fifth Fleet's primary mission would become clearing the strait. That means airstrikes on the gunboat bases, engaging missile batteries along the Iranian coast. It turns into a full-scale air and naval war within 24 hours.
It really just highlights how thin that line is. We go about our days assuming the global economy is this robust, unshakable machine.
Right.
But it all hinges on a 21-mile strip of water and the decision-making of a few commanders in the middle of the night.
It proves that stability is an active effort. It's not the default setting of the world. The events of February 3rd were bold and they were reckless, but they were also calibrated. They walked right up to the line of catastrophe and stopped inches short.
A crisis that waited.
Precisely. The water's still flowing today, the tankers are still navigating through, but the threat never actually left. It's still there, lurking on the radar screens.
You know, there's one final thing that kind of haunts me about this. We've been talking about the human element here, the tanker captain's decision to speed up, the restraint of the U.S. warship commander, the calculus of the Iranian leadership, human beings making choices under immense pressure.
Which is frightening enough.
But looking at the trajectory of naval technology, we aren't that far off from a world where those gunboats are unmanned, where the defense systems on the tankers are automated.
That's the real nightmare scenario.
Right. I mean, what happens in 5 years when an autonomous drone swarm surrounds a ship? When the decision to escalate isn't made by a commander weighing the geopolitical risks of angering China, but by an algorithm that's just reacting to a proximity alert.
You remove the hesitation. Humans hesitate because we fear consequences. Algorithms, they just execute code.
Yeah.
If we replace the fear that kept the strait open last week with cold, hard logic loops, we might not be so lucky the next time around.
A very sobering thought to leave you with. The strait is open, for now. The ships are moving, but the margin for error is getting thinner every single day.
And the water's getting more crowded.
We'll be watching the radar. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Until next time.